What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Kids Talk Sports podcast. And on today's episode, I'm going to be reviewing the Super Bowl game. I'm going to be talking about who I thought maybe stepped up a little bit for both teams, talk about who I thought should have won, who did win, and maybe talk about maybe some game-changing plays that could have gone the 49ers way or the Chiefs way. So let's get into it. And then also at the end of the episode, I have shout-outs to give to people who answered the question of the week. So let's get into it. So first we'll talk about the Chiefs side of things. So the Super Bowl ended up it was a very, very close game. The Chiefs ended up winning 25-22 in overtime. And Patrick Mahomes, like every single Super Bowl, he clutches every single Super Bowl. He went 34 for 36 with 333 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and only 1 interception, which came at the start of the third quarter. And it was just a bad throw, really, and I think he just needed to settle down a little bit. He also had 66 rushing yards, and Travis Kelce had 9 receptions for 93 yards. So the Chiefs defense really stepped up, I'd say, in this game. They had some clutch plays, some clutch stops on like 4th down, so I really think that was good from the Chiefs. Their offense obviously played really, really well. It started off a little shaky. The 49ers started off by getting a field goal. Then they scored a touchdown on a trick play. And then the Chiefs answered with the field goal, and then at the start of the third quarter, the Chiefs threw an interception. So it took a while for their offense to get going, but they finally did get going. But their defense is really what saved them. On the 49ers side of things, Brock Purdy went 23 for 38 with 255 passing yards and 1 passing touchdown. And a lot of people were saying that Brock Purdy wouldn't play good because, he's a second-year player coming into the Super Bowl, first time in the Super Bowl, and they were thinking, maybe he won't play as well. The nerves might get to him. He might throw too many interceptions. He might be distracted, all that stuff. He might not be focused. But Brock Purdy really did prove them haters wrong with a passing touchdown, 255 passing yards, and surprisingly, no interceptions, which the veteran Patrick Mahomes did throw an interception. Brock Purdy played a really smooth game. He didn't force anything, didn't really turn the ball over at all. So props to Brock Purdy. He played a really good game. Also, another person who played a good game, Christian McCaffrey, who had 22 carries for 80 rushing yards, 8 receptions for 80 receiving yards. So he had 160 total yards. And he had I don't know if it would be a rushing or receiving, because it was like a little trick play where Jerron Jennings threw him the ball in the backfield. I'd say a receiving touchdown. Yeah, it is a receiving touchdown. He also had a receiving touchdown on a crazy trick play where Brock Purdy had the ball, then he throws it to the left of him, to the sideline to Jerron Jennings. Then Jerron Jennings got hit while he threw the ball all the way across to the other side of the field to Christian McCaffrey. And then McCaffrey had blockers in front of him, and then he was gone for a touchdown. That was a crazy play. So shout out to Jerron Jennings. He really stepped up in this game. Jerron Jennings, he had a receiving touchdown, a passing touchdown. He had some clutch catches. He had a receiving touchdown where the defender wrapped his arms around his legs, and Jerron Jennings just dragged him all the way to the end zone. It's really funny. Then he reached over to the goal line. And Jerron Jennings was a guy who really I don't want to say he hadn't played well all season, but just really didn't show up all season. He wasn't really getting the ball. It didn't seem like the Brock Purdy, Jerron Jennings chemistry was just there yet. But, Jerron Jennings is clutched up in college. He had a crazy Hail Mary catch against Georgia when he was at Tennessee. But shout out to Jerron Jennings. He had a clutch game. Some things I wanted to talk about though were the turnovers. There's a lot of turnovers. McCaffrey fumbled on the first possession. Patrick Mahomes had a 50-yard pass complete to Richie James to set them up at the 9-yard line. And then the next play, they ran the ball with Isaiah Pacheco. He fumbled. Mahomes threw an interception at the start of the third quarter. I mean, there was a lot of turnovers, but in the end, this game was really good. It was 19-19 going into overtime, and then overtime is when everything crazy happens. So they do the coin toss, the 49ers win it, and the overtime rules are a little different in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl. So let me explain them to you. So in the regular season, the regular overtime rules are, so let's say it's the 49ers versus the Chiefs, and the Chiefs win the toss, and they want to receive. If they score a touchdown on that drive, then they win the game, and the other team doesn't get a chance. But if let's say they scored a field goal, and the 49ers scored a touchdown, then the 49ers would win. And then if they both scored a field goal, then it'd go to sudden death. But in the playoffs, each team gets a chance, and the 49ers players came out and said that they did not know the overtime rules, but then Kyle Shanahan came out and said that they did know the overtime rules, so it's kind of confusing. But in that situation, if I knew the overtime rules, I definitely would have elected to defend. I would have wanted the ball on the second possession with a chance to win it. I would have trusted my offense more than my defense. That's just me, though. If I was like a coach, I'd really trust in my offense more than my defense. But that's just my decision. But Patrick Mahomes, McCole Hardman, or it was McCole Hardman or Richie James. I think it was McCole Hardman. It was a really good play design, whereas a play action, then Mahomes rolled out to the right, and McCole Hardman ran out to the right. It's just an easy touchdown, and they celebrated. Of course, Taylor Swift celebrated with Travis Kelce. But it was a pretty interesting game to watch. So to wrap it up, Patrick Mahomes, 34 for 46, 333 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 1 interception, and 66 rushing yards. Travis Kelce also had 9 receptions for 93 yards. Brock Purdy went 23 for 38 with 255 passing yards and 1 passing touchdown. And Christian McCaffrey had 8 receptions for 80 receiving yards, 22 rushes for 80 rushing yards, and a receiving touchdown. McCole Hardman had a game-winning 3-yard receiving touchdown. And the Chiefs win 25-22 in overtime, and they win the Super Bowl. So that kind of wraps up that. But this is kind of a short episode, but before we end off this episode, I have some shout-outs to give to people who answered the question of the week. So the first shout-out goes to Theo, and Theo said that they would pick Tommy DeVito to be their chef because he would make me a lot of pizza. I like that pick. I love pizza, and I think Tommy DeVito is an underrated quarterback. I think he can be good at sometimes. And then the next shout out goes to Ezra, who said that 2 weeks ago they said that their bodyguard, they would have to pick Dexter Lawrence. I think that's a pretty underrated pick. I like that pick. And then they also said that they picked Josh Allen to be their chef because he has long arms, so he'd be a good chef. So shout out to Ezra and Theo for answering this week's question of the week, or last week's question of the week. And this week's question of the week is, what is your favorite college basketball team? Again, this week's question of the week is, what is your favorite college basketball team? You can send in your answer to this week's question of the week and previous question of the weeks to my email. My email is talksportswithmason@gmail.com. Again, my email is talksportswithmason@gmail.com. And thank you guys so much for listening to my podcast. I really appreciate it. If you keep answering question of the weeks, you can definitely get some shout outs. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Also, if you'd like to check out my YouTube channel, I have video recordings of me filming my podcast on my YouTube channel if you'd like to check that out. So, as always, thank you guys so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.